So today I am here to talk about all the books that I read during the month of August. I had another weird reading month, so I talked about in my July wrap-up that I didn't read anything for until the 20th of the month. So almost the first 3 weeks I read one book, and basically the exact same thing happened to me again this month. So up until I think the 20th of this month, I had only read one book, but in the remaining 10 days I read a ton. So I ended up completing 8 books this month, and I'm super happy with that, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about them today. I read some books that I really loved. I gave a couple 5 stars out, and then I gave a couple lower ratings. I had basically all over the board. I had 5 stars, I had 4 stars, I had 3 stars, I had 2 stars, so let's just get into the books. So starting with my favorite book of the month, not even a question, my favorite book was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I loved this book so much, I gave it a 5 out of 5 star. This book is following a middle-aged band of monster hunting mercenaries. When they were younger, they had formed this band together, but they have long since kind of all parted ways for various reasons. The main character that we're following is Clay Cooper, and one day one of his former bandmates shows up at his doorstep and is begging for his help to go rescue his daughter. From that point on, we just go on the most incredible and heartwarming but dangerous journey through this crazy forest while they're trying to get to the city under siege that his daughter is being held in. If I could give this book more than 5 stars, I probably would. I loved each and every character so much. There was absolutely nothing that I didn't love about it. I was so emotionally invested in this book that I was laughing at times with them, I was tearing up at other times, and it is really rare for me to cry while I'm reading, but I definitely got really close to it at some points in this book. I just felt so connected with it, and I just loved it so much. I'm going to be doing a dedicated review for this on my channel. I don't know if it'll be already up or not, but once I do post it, I'll have it linked up in the cards. I'll go into my full spoiler-free thoughts during that video. Now for my least favorite book of the month, that sadly was The Falconer by Elizabeth May. I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 star, so it was pretty disappointing for me. This book is following Elena about a year after her mother has been killed by a fairy, and she's the only person who knows this is what happened to her mother. Other people kind of suspect that she killed them, but the rumor is that it was an animal attack. Nobody really knows how her mother died except for her. Since this has happened, she is on a very big, rageful revenge plot against all fairies. She's hunting them down. She's trying to ultimately look for the one that killed her mother, all while she's trying to maintain the guise of being this very prim and proper Scottish lady from the 1800s. There wasn't really too much about this book that I really liked. I did like Kieran, I liked his character, and I liked the idea of the Scottish setting, but I didn't really like the execution. There really was nothing that made me really feel like it was Scottish. Even the way the dialogue was written felt more of an American accent other than people occasionally saying I. I definitely think that there's ways to write dialogue that can convey an accent, and I wish that that would have been applied in this book, because it really would have added so much more to the story and been so much more immersive. The main criticism that I had for this book was that it felt kind of like the second book in a series. We missed so much important things happening in the past. I think the story really could have benefited from starting at the point where our main character discovers her mother's body. She has this very intense bloodlust for killing fairies. I didn't really believe it because I didn't ever see how she went from being this very traditional Scottish lady to being what she is now. It just felt like kind of a disconnect there. You're telling me this, but I don't believe it. She's also an inventor, and I think that that could have used from a little bit more historical development. It could have showed as she's trying to create these different things for use in her fairy hunting, but instead it just kind of felt cheesy, and I didn't like it at all. I think both of those things could have easily been fixed had the story started earlier and added in quite a bit of character development leading up to the point that this book actually does start. There's also a very particular date that their world is supposed to be basically ending, and that never felt serious. She was still going to balls and would just bring it up every once in a while, so it never really felt like a heavy plot point, and I thought that could have been so suspenseful, but it just really missed the mark. But just overall, I didn't like this book. I definitely won't be continuing on with this series. So I guess I read 2 books before the 20th. The first one that I read was The Astonishing X-Men Volume 2 by Joss Wheaton and John Cassidy. So this is a graphic novel bind-up of issues 7 through 12, and I loved this volume even more than the first one. The first one I gave a 4 star. This one I definitely gave a 5 star. This was a great way to start out my month. The overarching plotline in this book has to do with the Danger Room, and it was absolutely immaculate. I was just obsessed with it. I felt so much suspense and trying to wait to figure out what was going to happen next. Also, in the first issue, there's a really fun crossover with the Fantastic Four that was really fun to read. I love seeing like superhero crossovers. It's just like a little tidbit that I really enjoy in graphic novels. There also was a particular scene with Peter and Kitty, and oh my gosh, it was such a good scene. You just felt the tension. They are seriously one of my favorite X-Men couples, and for forever it's always been Scott and Jean for me. That has always been my favorite X-Men couple, but now I kind of think my favorite X-Men couple is Kitty and Peter. I just love them. I can't wait to get more in volume 3. I also read the second book in the Themis files, Waking Gods by Sylvain Nouvelle. This book is following a scientist who, when she was a child, she kind of stumbled upon this giant robot hand, and she has devoted her adult life to studying who created this robot and why. It's told through dossier notes and different interviews and things like that. I was really teetering in between a 4 and a 5 star for this one, but I did end up going with a 5 star because those last 25 pages were absolutely crazy. I was like mouth agape, shocked at what was happening at the end. I cannot wait to read the third book, so I'm very much anticipating that one to see how this whole thing wraps up. My favorite thing I love about this series is that it just really keeps you guessing and keeps me on my toes. I never can tell where the story is going next. I constantly am thinking like, where is this gonna go? And I can never figure it out. The author also does a really great job at keeping things high stakes. He doesn't use plot armor for the characters in this series, which is kind of scary because you never know if your favorite characters are going to be safe or not. But I overall just really enjoyed this book. There is something about the series that I don't 100% connect with. Like, I don't think it's going to be like an all-time favorite series, but I did really enjoy this one, and I definitely think it was better than the first one. Then I read A River of Royal Blood by Amanda Joy. I ended up giving this book a 3 star. This is a YA fantasy following a world in which whenever there is 2 princesses born, they basically have to battle to the death for the throne when the youngest one turns of age. So we're following the younger of the 2 sisters, Eva, and she is definitely not the favored one to win this like rivalry with her sister. She hasn't been able to access her magic her whole life, where her sister has been able to easily access hers and easily master it. So it automatically puts Eva at a disadvantage. Going into this book, I wasn't really sure what I would think of it. It ended up being just a very middle of the road YA fantasy for me. As I mentioned, it was 3 stars, which is just an average rating for me. Not great, not terrible. The premise was definitely my favorite thing about this book. I loved the setup of the rivalry between the 2 sisters. Similar to Three Dark Crowns, that was one of my favorite things about the first couple books in that series too. The author also did a great job at setting up this world with a very rich history and culture. She very much detailed the different traditions and how long they've done things that allowed the reader to get a really great grasp of the world. My favorite character was definitely Fallon. I thought his relationship with Eva was just so sweet and genuine, and their friendship was just so precious. The only thing I specifically disliked about this book was the storyline with Batcha. I just didn't believe his introduction, and how that whole thing happened was very coincidental and unbelievable to me. So while there wasn't anything like bad about this book, there was just a feeling that I had of wanting more from it. I wanted more of the sibling rivalry. I wanted more of her relationship with her sister. I wanted more information about the other species in this world. I wanted more about her relationship with her mother and father, etc., etc. The plotline was a very linear plot, just from here to there, and I think that it could have benefited a lot from beefing it up with some more side plots with those different elements that I mentioned. Could have really added in a lot of depth to this book. Despite all what I said, I don't think that this was a bad book by any means, and I actually think it is a fantastic book for its target demographic. I've just come to recognize that this book isn't for me personally. Then the last physical book that I read this month was The Queen of the Tierling by Erica Johansson. This book is following Kelsey, who is the heir to the Tierling throne. When she was a baby, her mother had her sent away for her protection just shortly before she died. But now Kelsey is 19 years old, which means that she's old enough to go back and take the throne from the regent. This is basically following her as she is trying to develop a good relationship with her people of her country, and also deal with the very fragile relationship that they have with their neighboring country, who is ruled by a very like evil tyrant queen. I'm so glad I finally got to this series. It has been sitting on my shelf for years and years, and I've had my eye on it for even longer than that. I feel like since right when it came out, I've had it on my radar but just never picked it up. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars, so I did really enjoy it and it had me really intrigued but not a new favorite. I'm really interested in learning more about the Red Queen and about the Crossing and about Fetch. Those things were so interesting to me and I definitely am wanting to continue on with the series so I can learn more about them. I also really liked the way that Kelsey dealt with her newfound responsibility. She really stepped up to the plate when she could have used so many things as an excuse for not being a good queen. She basically just did what she had to do, and I really liked that about her character. I think this could have benefited from a little bit more with the plot and the world building though. There was a few things that just felt a little bit murky to me. I'm sure they'll be addressed in the subsequent books, but I think it could have benefited from a little reworking. One little petty thing that I had as a problem with this book was I didn't like that the main character's name was Kelsey Rayleigh and her mother's name was Alyssa or Elisa. I don't know how you would say it, but either Elisa or Alyssa and Kelsey Rayleigh. I felt like those both were too modern of names for the setting, especially when you have characters like Bartholomew and Lazarus and then you have Kelsey and Elisa. Like, I didn't really like their names very much, but that's just a very, petty criticism I have with it. I actually think this would be a fantastic book if you're looking to transition from reading basically exclusively YA into adult fantasy. It kind of has a good crossover appeal. But I will say that there is adult content in this book, so beware of that if you're a younger reader or if you're recommending it to a younger reader. But I think if you are older and you're wanting to read more adult fantasy but feel a little bit intimidated because you've read mostly YA, I think this would be a good place to start with that. Then I listened to 2 audiobooks this month, the first one being Heartberries by Therese Marie Mailhot. This is a memoir essay collection that really is a deep dive into her headspace while she's processing and healing from various traumatic events that she's experienced in her life. It definitely is an extremely raw and honest look at how these different experiences have affected her mental health. She really doesn't hold anything back. The prose in this book is very poetic and flowery and beautiful. It does lean kind of on the side of stream of consciousness at some points. This was the first essay collection that I've ever read, and I don't think that this format is really for me. I didn't really enjoy the format, and I also don't really like stream of consciousness style memoirs or just writing in general, so I don't know if I'll be picking up more of essay collections, but I do think that this book has a lot of merit, and I think that a lot of people will really deeply connect to it. Then the last audiobook I listened to this month was Hidden Figures by Margot Shetterly. This is a nonfiction book about the female mathematicians at NASA who really helped get the space program on its feet and helped get man into space. I did really love the story that this book was telling, like I knew that it would, but the writing just did not do it for me. So I think that the movie version of this will be a little bit more up my alley than the book itself was. I just felt like the author was trying to say so much information at once, and I really would have appreciated it being pared down a little bit more so I could have formed a better emotional connection to the women themselves. Oftentimes, because of how much information she was trying to tell, it came across as a little bit cold or just like factual rather than really telling a heartwarming story about these women's achievements. So I think that I definitely will be watching the movie, but I don't know if I'll be picking up more from Margot Shetterly in the future. Well, that's all the books that I read during the month of August. Like I said, kind of all over the place, but I'm happy with the amount that I read. I'm hoping in September, now that I have an all-adult SFF TBR, I'll be a little bit more motivated since I'm super excited about those books. And stay tuned for my September wrap-up to hear what I would think about those books. I'll link my September TBR up there if you haven't watched it yet so you can see what I'll be reading. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like this video down below and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!